we drape it over this. There, everybody can see this, correct? This wonderful, beautiful colored scarf. What I want you guys to do is I want to invite you to close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes. That's not okay for you. You don't have to close your eyes, but I want you to think of, what does this remind you of? What, like a place, does it remind you of? Does it remind you of somebody? Where does this remind you of? So I'll give you a couple minutes, or not a couple minutes, I'll just give you a few seconds to just think of what that reminds you of. Now that you've got it in your mind, I want you to think of a word that represents how you feel there. What does it feel like there? And now I want you to think of a word that represents that place for you. Think about what that represents for you. Now, if this place had a voice, what would it say? Would it say something to you, to your heart? Does it show you things? And anybody can jump in. I just want whoever, you can just yell it out. What does this place represent for you? What is the one word that represented the place for you? Home. Home?
Christmas.
Christmas.
Scotland.
Scotland?
Ireland.
Ireland. Awesome.
Grandpa.
Grandpa or grandma?
Grandpa.
Grandpa.
Potato chips.
Potato chips?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. What was that one?
I said
Dragon? Awesome. What was this? What is the feeling that you had there?
Peace.
Peace?
Joy.
Joy?
Chaotic.
Chaotic?
Mischief.
Mischief?
Like chaotic.
Chaotic again?
Carefree.
Carefree?
Love.
Love.
Family.
What was that one?
Family.
Family? Awesome. And if that voice, or if that place had a voice, what did it say to you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're brave.
You're brave.
Calm down.
Calm down.
You're driving too fast.
Driving too fast. Very much in line with Grandpa, right? Anybody else?
Welcome.
Welcome. That's perfect for tonight. I want to invite you guys here to be present here as Autumn and I share our story. Everybody has their own story, right? Your story is different than mine. Mine's going to be different than yours. But in so many ways, they relate to each other. Mine started when I was like 9 or 10 years old. I got introduced to pornography. The rest of my life, I dealt with it. Just off and on. Obviously, it wasn't as readily available back then as it is now. But whenever I had the chance, absolutely, I was going after it. And I thought that when I got married, it was going to go away. That my drive for this pornography and masturbation was going to go away. Because I'm married. Hey, that's the normal, right? I get married, all those things go away. Totally not the case. When I got married, soon after, it all came back. And I didn't disclose any of that to my wife. I didn't let her know. I didn't let her know like what that was like for me. I didn't even let her know that I had an issue. I didn't even know I had an issue. Because I didn't know there was anything such as a sexual addiction. But then it got worse and worse as I started looking at my life with my wife and my marriage, and I'm like, man, my married life sucks. We're fighting all the time. My sex life sucks. Yeah. And within 3 months of just really getting into a lot of pornography, where it used to be just every once in a while, became almost a daily occurrence for me. And then within 3 months, I was like, you know what? Well, if everything else sucks, I'm going to go find it somewhere else. So I started an affair, and I ended up carrying that affair on for about 20 months. And then I had multiple affairs within that time frame. And my wife knew, but she didn't know. Like, she would be like, are you having an affair with so-and-so? And it was the weirdest thing, because she knew who it was too. Every time she'd be like, are you having an affair with this woman? I'm like, no, I'm not. And I was like doing everything I can to possibly hide it, to lie about it. And she's like, well, I want you to bring your phone records home. All right. I spent the next day 8 hours changing all the numbers in my phone records so that I could give it to her and be like, hey, here you go. You can see I don't have anything. I'm not doing these things. I got caught for one. And when I talk about God, it's about the higher power, whatever your higher power is, right? And we're LDS. That's actually part of our story. And so I got caught for one affair, but I was only going to disclose the one. I hadn't even started to begin to tell her that I had any other affairs, that I had started drinking, any of that. Because I was like, oh, I can get excommunicated from my church, and then in a year I can get rebaptized and be totally forgiven of my sins, and I don't have to disclose it. It's like perfect. That was just what the enemy had a grip on me. So I was disfellowshipped from my church at the time, and then I carried on an affair with my buddy's wife. That affair carried on for a while, and all of a sudden I was dropping her off at her work. We had just picked up some alcohol because we were going hunting, and she received a phone call from her husband, and she looks at me and she goes, he knows. So then my phone started going crazy. So I pick up the phone, and Autumn is just absolutely beside herself, angry, rightfully so. So by the time I got home, my mom had called me, and she saw, you need to call 911. Autumn's tried to kill herself. So my wife tried to take her life because she thought that this woman could come in and be a better mom to my kids, a better wife for me, just be somebody better than what she was. Because of my addiction, because I couldn't stop. And so I ran in the door, and I was picking my wife up off the ground as she was literally dying in my arms. In and out of consciousness, she has no idea what's going on. And I just started praying, God, I will stop everything if you just let her live. I will stop it all. Autumn ended up spending 3 days in the ICU and another week in the LDS hospital. And I started to slowly come out and tell her like everything. There was still some stuff I just was not ready to tell her yet. I was too scared. That fear was still instilled in me. The shame that I had was just still overwhelming. I still didn't want to fully disclose everything. Again, that was what Satan had a grip on me for. Within a year after that, I started multiple affairs again. It finally got to the point where I hated the man that I had become. I didn't like the things that I was doing, and I was like, you know what? I got to do something different. If I want to make some changes, I got to do some big things, and I got to lay everything out. I laid everything out to my wife. I disclosed everything from when I was a kid all the way through the rest of my life. I even disclosed that when I was a child that I was molested, and I had never told anybody that story ever. She watched me become someone new when I finally let it all go. This addiction had consumed my life for so long And I was finally like, I can make some changes. So I started doing some different things. So I would blind carbon copy my wife on every email that would go out, so she knew that it was totally professional. I removed all women off my instant messenger because that was my way of kind of getting into the grooming the women and getting into their lives and what their lives were like with their relationships with their husbands. I actually started praying. Instead of praying when I needed to, when I got caught and I'm like, God, please let me help, or please help me so I don't have to disclose this. I was like, hey, God, show me how I can love my wife again. Show me the things that I can love about her. Help me in my recovery. Help me make these changes so that I can become someone new. Help me see myself as you see me. I started an addiction recovery program called Life Starter. I went into that for a while, and I actually ended up starting that back over when I finally did the full disclosure. And then I started the addiction recovery 12-step program. And I was in that for a while. I actually ended up, after I got rebaptized, I was actually able to become a facilitator of that for about 7 years. Even facilitated the youth pilot program for boys that were 16 to 18 years old. And it was awesome. And what was really cool is just to watch so many guys come in there so scared and broken, that we all know how scary it is to step into something new and to watch people change. Watch as they turn their life over to their higher power and what that can do for them. As I started doing that, I would make sure that I'm checking in with my wife all the time, letting her know where I'm at. Here, you have access to my phone any given time if you want it. I don't care. And even 15 years later of sobriety, anytime she asks me for my phone, yeah, here you go. You can have it. Because I don't have anything on there. You can go look through my computer because there's nothing on there. I don't care. I finally had to make some choices for myself. For me, addiction became a choice. I can either choose to act out or choose to reach out. And reaching out for me looked like many different ways. One, I would reach out to God. And if that didn't work and that wasn't enough and the temptation was still there, I'd reach out to my buddies in recovery. Because it was really hard to humble myself, to be humble enough to call before I acted out and said, hey, I'm struggling. Man, these temptations are coming. I'm feeling it. I need some help. And just doing something different to break out of that addiction cycle helped me over and over and over again. Allowed me to be able to be like, it's okay for me to reach out before. And it's okay for me if I have temptations. Yeah, that's okay. I used to totally beat myself up. What's wrong with me? Why do these temptations keep coming back? I've got some sobriety behind me. Why do these temptations keep coming back? There's got to be something wrong with me. And I'm like, I'm worthless. Why do I feel this way? But I started realizing that everybody, I don't care who you are, you have temptations for something. For others, it's all sorts of different things, right? Sexual addiction, drugs, alcohol, gaming, pornography, food, whatever it is, Diet Coke. We got all sorts of stuff that people are addicted to. And I don't care who you are, somebody has got temptation. But it's what we do with it that makes the biggest difference. So when I have those temptations, because I know they're coming, but I have a plan in place for when it does come. Because I'm not going to be shocked, oh, well, shoot, why am I having a temptation? No, I know it's going to come. But I know what I've got to do in order to get out of that temptation. And I don't beat myself up because, I have all these temptations. No, I know I've got to reach out to the guys in my recovery. I got to reach out to God. Sometimes I've even reached out to my wife, not letting her know that I'm even reaching out to her because I'm having temptations. I'm just removing myself from the situation, from those feelings. And sometimes I'm just sitting in it and being like, you know what? It's okay for me to have these feelings, to sit in these feelings of maybe sadness, frustration, anger, some stresses in my life. So some of the things that I started doing to change all that was I really got into hiking. Hiking has become a passion, huge passion of mine. I started doing that I always hiked, but I really got into it in my recovery. Because what happens is when I'm up there in nature, I hike about 400 miles a year. And so when I know as soon as my feet hit the dirt, no matter what I've got going on in my life, whatever stresses I've got going on, it's just gone. I don't have to worry about it. It just allows me to be able to connect with myself, allows me to connect with God, and allows me to connect with nature. And if you look at a lot of like addiction recovery programs and centers, the majority of them are in the mountains or very close to the mountains. There's a reason why that is. Look how close we are. We can walk to the mountain from here. There's a reason for that. Because when you even just walk out in nature, it helps reset your mind. Why do you think in New York City, in one of the busiest places in the world, with all these skyscrapers, all these buildings, why do you think they put a park right in the middle of it all? They know people will need a place for them to be able to connect with nature, to be able to get rid of all the stresses in their life, to have those stresses relieved, and just be and sit in their emotions. And sometimes those emotions are really hard to sit in. I've been in it a long time, and I know it can be really hard. But as I've made all these different changes, I've been able to in April, I hit 15 years of sobriety from being with another woman. January, I hit 15 years of sobriety from looking at pornography. And in December, I hit 13 years of sobriety from masturbation. So I've got 3 different dates because some are just harder than others. And they're just really hard. And one of the things that I heard today, actually, was James Franco. Everybody knows the actor James Franco, correct? He says, sexual addiction is such a powerful drug, it completely blinds you to other people's feelings. Man, that hit me so good. I'm like, I totally was like that. Totally blind to what I was doing to my wife. Totally blind to what I was doing to those that were around me. I thought everybody else had a problem, not me. I'm just fine. But turns out I was an ass. I wasn't very nice. I was really quick to anger and snapping really fast. And so I heard another quote too, or one of the questions that I heard was, and I want you guys to ask yourself this: did you have a hard day? Or did you have a hard 5 minutes you milked all day? That just hits different, huh? Did you have a hard day? Or did you have a hard 5 minutes that you milked all day? We may have those temptations that come up. I know I can have those temptations come up and be like, well, there we go. I just suck. Guess that goes the rest of the day. No, we can change that. We don't have to live in that for very long. We can get out of it. Because if you can feel it, you can heal it. And if you feel those feelings of anger, feelings of resentment, you can change that. One of the ways that I was able to change it in my life is there's an app called the 1 Minute Pause app. And what I love about this app is it's just a quick meditation, and it's a 1, 3, 5, or 10-minute pause that you can do. You can pull it up on any phone. You can do it wherever, and I use it a lot in my hiking, or if there's temptations that come on, and I pull it up, and I may sit with it for 5 minutes, and it talks about surrendering those feelings to our higher power, to God, and allows me to, once I've surrendered that, God, just fill me with your love. Saturate me with your love. And what I love about that too is that I looked up the word saturation. And saturate means to completely be filled so that nothing else, to be overflowing. To be overflowing from the love of our God, our higher power. I'd much rather sit in that feeling than the feeling of hate and all the shit that we deal with. I'd much rather sit in that better feeling. That's where I want to be more. And so as I've made all these changes, I've been able to, we've been able to speak all over the place, up in Alaska and Arizona, California, Idaho. We even did we had some translation stuff for some stuff that we did over in the Ukraine. So that was kind of cool. We had to get up super freaking early in the morning, but it was kind of fun. But I've been able to make all these changes, and now I see life totally different. I know I'm going to have temptations. I'm like, okay, I know what I got to do when I have those come up. But now I can also have the ability to be able to fight for my heart. I never knew that I should fight for my own heart. I always thought that I needed to make sure that I was taking care of everybody else. But my heart is absolutely important. And allows me to be able to fight for my wife's heart, because I wasn't doing that either. For my kids' heart, because I wasn't doing that either. I was just there, but I wasn't present. I was just checked out in life. Now I'm able to live a life fully alive. And that is awesome. To step into my aliveness completely changes everything. It changes how I feel about myself, how I see myself. And if I ask you the question, what makes your heart come alive? Do you know what that is? What makes your heart come alive? What was that? Nature. Okay? Sorry, by the way, I'm partially deaf, so it's hard for me to hear. What makes your heart come alive, man? Yeah.
Riding dirt bikes mostly.
Yeah. There's something about, right? And these are in nature. Anybody else?
Chevy V8 horsepower, man.
Chevy V8 horsepower. There you go. So if I ask you that question, you don't know what makes your heart come alive? Maybe start asking yourself, what does make my heart come alive? And what I'm talking about when I say what makes your heart come alive is, what is it that when you do it, you can forget about everything? You can feel it in your body. It just feels so good. And you just feel so connected with your body. You feel so connected to maybe those that are around you. You feel so connected with God. And it's just a beautiful place for you to be. Okay? I'm going to turn the time over to my wonderful wife, Autumn, and she's going to share her side of the story. And we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Autumn, and I wanted to start with a quote. It's when someone shows you their heart, their past, their wounds, they have entrusted you with the deepest part of themselves. It is the part of themselves that makes them uniquely beautiful. To be trusted in this way is a great honor. Guard that trust with your life. So I'm here sharing my story with you, and I know none of you. I know one person here. And I'm not asking you to guard it with your life, but if you would just please honor that. And I pledge my confidentiality to the things that are happening here. I feel that's really important. And I cry, I'm sorry. But a little background about me. My parents were teen parents. My mom was 17 and my dad was 18 when I was born, and they got married. And then they were divorced by the time I was 8 years old, and they were both remarried by the time I was 10. My dad became an alcoholic, and my parents left disciplining and things up to step parents, and I feel like my parents, both sets of my parents, did the best they could with what they knew, but there was some emotional and physical abuse that took place, and I think it was just the time, like they were raised that, you spanked your kid, you hit your kids, and so that was just kind of put upon me a little bit. And now there's been a lot of healing around that in my life with my parents, and I'm very close to my parents now. But I met Chris in high school. We were friends. I dated one of his friends in high school, and we broke up, and then we just became best friends, and we got married when we were 19. And I didn't, like he said, I didn't know much of things. He had said that he'd seen pornography like one time when we got married. He said, I saw it on a video once. And I said, do you have a problem with masturbation? He's like, no. And so I was like, okay. And we got married, and we had a daughter, and then our second son was born. And things from my childhood started coming out. My dad became an alcoholic around the time that I can recall. I was about a junior in high school. So I would come home, and my dad was a nice drunk. My dad never hit me. He didn't yell or scream, but I could remember coming home from high school functions, and my dad would have a 12-pack of beer, and it would just all be gone, and be like, hey, life was great with my dad. He was just, that's what he did. And he was a functional alcoholic for a long, long time. And then I got married, and I had 2 beautiful kids, and things from my childhood came up for me. And I thought that maybe I had some postpartum depression. And so I started seeing a therapist for the things that I'd gone through when I was younger. And I didn't really feel like it was getting me anywhere. I had gone to therapy before when my parents were divorced when I was young, and I didn't really recall much, but I kept going to therapy. And then our second boy was about 2, and we were going through some fertility things. And Chris and I started arguing a lot. I call it surface living. So both of us did a lot of surface living. Tons of like, hey, how are you today? And he was going to college and going to school and working full time. He had a business, and I was working to put him through school. And we just felt like we were crossing in the night a lot. We never deep dove. We never got into real things, but we could argue a lot. And I was just like, something's off in our marriage. And I had asked him, I said, are you going to cheat on me like my dad cheated on my mom? He's like, oh no, I would never do that. I would never do that to you. And the arguing got worse. And then I started to ask questions. I feel like loved ones of addicts really know how to ask good questions. We're not stupid. And I started asking some questions, and he would lie. And then we started going to marriage counseling. And he gaslit me in marriage counseling. I would never hurt my wife. I would never do this. This is her. She's a bitch. She's this. She's that. And I really thought I was just going crazy. I just thought I was going nuts. And we were trying to get pregnant with a 3rd baby, and we had tried for about a year, and I couldn't get pregnant. And so the arguing and the fighting got to the point where I was like, I'm going to go back on birth control, and we need to get some help. And I ended up getting pregnant. I found out I was pregnant literally like 2 days after I had this conversation with Chris. And I was devastated that I was going to bring this little baby into a marriage that was horrible. And I loved him so much. Like, I was so excited to have it be pregnant again, but I was so scared because I was like, I'm bringing this baby into this horrible situation. And we had him, and then about 6 months later, he came to me. Like he said, went through a disciplinary action with our church and was disfellowshipped, and he lied to me the whole time. He lied about everything. And then about 6 months after that, I got a phone call. We had just moved to a new home, and I got a phone call from a friend's husband. And I don't answer my phone when other men usually call unless it's my family, and I didn't. My phone rang for probably 20 minutes. So I'm like, something's wrong. So I answered my phone, and he told me what had gone on with him, with Chris and his wife. And I called my mom, and I called my mother-in-law, and I told them goodbye and to take care of my kids. And I took I had a box. We had just moved. I had a box with all the medications in our whole house, and I took the whole entire box of medication, and I woke up in an ambulance throwing up all over a paramedic. And my life was rocked, to say the least. I was pissed at God. I was mad at my husband. I was mad that I'd been put in a situation like my mom had been put in. I felt betrayed in the worst way. And I spent, like he said, I spent 3 days in the ICU. And then I went to the LDS uni, and I sat in there for a week. And I had 2 ecclesiastical leaders come visit me, and they asked if they could pray with me, and I said yes. And they just said, we'll support you in whatever you decide to do. And I felt that love and support, and I didn't know what to do. I had prayed. I was like, do I stay with Chris? Do I divorce him? My mom was super mad. She was like, get him out. Like, we'll do whatever it takes to get you out of your situation. And so I prayed. I'm like, God, I need an answer. And plain as day, I could see Chris as who God had intended him to be. And I was like, I'll stay. And so I did. And that kind of began our recovery journey. I did not know what I was signing up for. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, the best thing I've ever done too. But our marriage therapist actually referred Chris to a recovery program, and then a recovery therapist, and then that therapist is like, oh, I'm leaving my practice, but I have this recovery program I'd like you to go to. And it's for spouses too. And I walked in the first day, and I thought, I'm going to be sitting in this room full of males, and I'm going to be the only wife of an addict sitting here. And I walked in, and it was a room full of husbands and wives and single men and single women. And after my first session, I was like, I'm in the right place. I know that God put me here. And that started my recovery process. We did a 3-month group therapy, and then we broke into women's groups and men's groups, and I stayed in my recovery group for 2.5 years. While I was in that recovery group, the first 6 months of our recovery, all I wanted to do was make Chris better. And I thought we would go to this recovery program for 3 months, and we would get out, and our life would be healed, and everything would be better, and Chris wouldn't have a problem anymore. And that's a load of shit. Sorry, it just was. It was just a load of crap. You don't know because you don't know. And as I started processing my own stuff, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a lifelong process. And so in my recovery, we worked a lot on boundaries, bottom lines. What does a boundary look like for a family, friend, or loved one of an addict? What is my bottom line? So my bottom line ended up being that I had to live with somebody who is in recovery for the rest of their life. So what that looks like in the beginning of recovery is totally different than what it is 15 years later. I was like, you got to go to meetings every week. You have to go to therapy every week. You have to have your group. You have to have a group of guys that you can talk to. We have to have marriage counseling. We have to have single counseling. We were doing all of the things in the beginning. If he had a slip within 24 hours, he had to disclose that. I had boundaries around what he would tell me a slip was. So if he disclosed a slip, I would say, okay, this is my boundary about your slip. We didn't sleep in the same room for 2 weeks. But I felt empowered. So as a spouse, family, or friend of an addict, if you have family that is getting help too while you're here, they're going to get empowered, and they're going to catch you in your bullshit, and they're going to catch themselves in their own bullshit too. I was like, oh, I'm codependent. Totally codependent. I would do anything to get Chris better. Anything. And codependency is not a word used right now. It's prodependency and all. I was codependent. I truly was a codependent person. So I would go to my therapy group, and then I'd come home and do all my assignments with my therapist and do my work on me. And then I'd be like, what did you do today in your group? What did your therapist say? Oh, you have homework? Okay, let me sit down. Did you do it? Oh, no, I'm not ready to do it. Oh, it's the day of therapy. Did you do your homework assignment? No. Well, let's sit down and talk about it. And so I just was like pushing him along in his recovery. And I was also doing a lot of trauma response things. So I was checking his phone a lot. My dad taught me how to hack it. My dad was a computer programmer. He taught me how to hack into his computer. So I showed up at his work one day. I said, hey, I need to get onto your computer. And he's like, what? I said, I need to get onto your computer. Got in, hacked the codes in, and up comes what I knew was going to come up. Oh, that's not mine. This is our office's. This is, I would call him several times a day. I was just doing a lot of crazy making in my head, just a ton, but it's a trauma response. And finally, after about a year in recovery, it just wasn't working for me anymore. And I can remember sitting on my kitchen floor, just bawling to God, please let me heal my life. What can I do, God? I can't do this anymore. And he said to me, you give me Chris. You give me Chris. You give Chris his addiction to me. And you let me take care of Chris, and I will take care of you. That's really scary for somebody who's had zero control in an addiction relationship with a spouse to go, here, God, here, take it all. But I did. And it was slow. It was like for 5 minutes, I can do this for 5 minutes. Oh, I can do this for an hour today. I can do this for a week. Oh, I can do this for a month. Oh, I slipped back. I took some of the control back. Oh, I need to give it back to you, God. I need to surrender that to you. And suddenly I was like, if I'm married, I'm married. If I'm divorced, I'll be divorced. But I know that God's got me and God has Chris. And along that time is when Chris started his epiphany or whatever with God, and he came to me and did full disclosure. I don't know if you guys talk about disclosure, and like you don't talk about disclosure. Okay, well, Chris, so his therapist now has a workbook on disclosure from our experience. But when you're an addict and you're like enlightened, you just want to onto your loved one, right? I did this when I was 5. I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And it is a lot. And sometimes we're not ready for that, or it's so much information that you're like, I'm out. And so you do that in a therapy setting. You ask your therapist to, hey, this is the disclosure. And we did it in a therapist's office the wrong way. He just blah all over me. And I was like, okay, I'm leaving for 2 weeks. And I left. I left our house and decided if I wanted to stay married again. And I decided I was going to stay with him. And I came back for a second time, and we did an in-house separation with the premise that we were going to stay married and work on our marriage. But I needed to feel safety first. And creating safety for me and Chris was not he never hit me or like verbally abused me or anything like that. It was more like being safe spiritually and mentally, like I can share something with you and you can hold that space for me. I feel triggered because you did something to me. Oh, you feel triggered because I did this? Yes. So holding that space for me was really important in creating safety in our home. In my recovery, my group was important, really, really important to me. I had a really amazing group of ladies going through the same thing that I was, and I went to my group faithfully every single week. And then when our group disbanded, because people moved out of state and things happened. We did Marco Polo. We texted each other. We would send each other pictures. This is my right now, and it's pretty crappy. Or this is so awesome. This is my right now. And they would be happy for me and celebrate my victories. Family support was really important for me. And I know some of us have families that we can't share our stories with, but we may have one person in our family who is safe for us. That's who I would share with. And God put those people into my path that I knew I could share my story with. My recovery looks different than Chris's, right? I did a lot of self-care, and self-care is not bubble baths and fizzy bombs and smelly lotions. That's great, right? But self-care is really taking care of yourself. Are you meditating? Are you hydrated? Are you praying to your higher power? If you're working, are you okay at your job? Are you happy today? What emotions are you feeling? Can you sit with your emotions? Or are they too scary that you can't even sit with them? And if they're too scary that you can't even sit with them, I needed to find somebody who could sit there with me in them. I had people that I knew I could contact and be like, I'm struggling and I need you to just sit with me today. Just sit here. Trying to think of some other things. I do a lot of affirmations in my recovery, and I know people are like, affirmations, like, blah, blah, blah. But they worked for me. I love reading. I love poetry. I love to be in nature too. When he asked you, how does God speak to your heart, or how does your higher power speak to you? I was mad at God for a long time. Because guess what? I lived my life the way I was supposed to. I did everything. I checked all the boxes. And I had this cute little family that I was supposed to be taking care of. And wham, all of this crap happens to us. And I'm mad. And I'm sitting in church every Sunday going, I don't belong here. Nobody knows what I'm going through. And guess what? That's Satan. That's his BS. Because everyone belongs in a church. Everyone belongs to God if you believe in God. And I'm like, I'll go sit there now, But I was mad at him, and I had to reconfigure my relationship with God. You deconstruct your relationship with God. I think everybody comes to a point in their life where you're like deconstruction and then reconstruction, especially when you've gone through trauma or you're coming from addiction. You're reconstructing who you are. You're reconstructing your values. You're reconstructing your family. You're reconstructing just the basics of your life. And I had to do that with God. And I had to do that with some of my familial relationships. While Chris was going through recovery, my dad full-blown almost died. He was septic in a hospital, and I had to call him out on his bull crap. And I'm the oldest of 5 kids. And so I'm sitting in a hospital. I get a phone call, and I'm like, my dad's in the hospital, and I go sit there, and they're like, we don't know why he's here. I'm out. You do know he's an alcoholic. No, he is. The doctor's like, he is? And we were leaving, and I had to call siblings and say, go to Dad's house and find the alcohol. It's there. And they found it. And then I had to have an intervention with my dad, me and my dad. And I'm sitting there like, I love you, Dad. I'm really mad at you. You need help. And he's like, I don't need any help. And then he finally said, I do need help. So I watched my dad go through AA and go through counseling and he didn't do inpatient, he did outpatient recovery. But the boundaries that I learned with Chris helped me have boundaries with my dad, because I loved my dad so much. I would have done anything for my dad. My dad was totally disconnected from me for a while. Like, I would call him and he'd be like, why are you calling me? Quit calling me. I just want to talk to you today, Dad. No, I don't want to talk to you today. I'm too busy. My dad just was not present because he's an alcoholic. And so when he started to heal his life, We had to heal a relationship and mend it. And then my dad got pancreatic cancer and died 6 years ago. And so you leave some things undone. And therapy binds it so that you can fix it. And I'm like, okay, I love my dad and I know he's in a better place, but I'm like, this affected me. It wasn't, and had I not gone through what Chris and I had gone through, I don't know that I could have handled what me and my dad went through and the relationship that we had before he died, which was beautiful and great. One question that I often get asked is about our kids and how it has affected our kids and what we've told our kids. And kids are not dumb. If you have kids and you think they don't know something is amiss, they know. If you have older kids, relationships can be broken, and that's a hard thing. And our kids were younger, and they mostly don't remember things, but we've told them at certain ages the age appropriateness of what his addiction looks like, and all of our kids know our story. So our youngest was a baby when all of this came out, and now he's 18. And so he knows our story. Our older kids know our story. A lot of people are like, porn's not an addiction. It ruined my family. Like, it effed my life up. Women ruined my family with him. Like, ruined me. So when people are like, oh, it's not a big deal. I've given up this and I've traded for this. Like, is that okay? I don't know. That's a question you have to answer yourself. Is your spouse okay with that? Do you feel like, I'm sitting in front of you guys and you're like, porn is the least of my problems today, seriously. And I'm like, that was the biggest thing that rocked my world, like totally shook my world up. Alcohol messed my whole childhood up. And I didn't even know why. I had no clue why until I was older. Why I had a disconnected dad. And he was an awesome dad. He was just disconnected from me. He made some mistakes. He's not a mistake. That's what I've learned through all this too. You have made mistakes, but you are not a mistake. Shame is, I am a mistake. Guilt is, I made some mistakes and I want to make them better. There's a big difference, right? Shame, we sit in shame. I sit in shame as a person. We sit in shame and let that fester, and then all the crap comes back up. We sit in, I did some things wrong and I'm healing my life, and I might take a step backwards for 1 minute, but guess what? I'm a child of God. I'm a daughter or son of a higher being. And guess what? He loves me even in my mistakes. I can move another step forward. Satan wants me to go, you're nothing, you're nobody, you have nothing, you've ruined everything. 20 steps back. And that's what the cycle of addiction is, right? That cycle just keeps going and going until we take a step out or we take a step around it and we go, okay, I made a mistake, but I'm right back here. Chris hasn't talked about this, but he said in the beginning of his recovery, he was always worried about his chips. I need my 30 days. If I just white knuckle it to my 30 days, I made it to 30 days. Okay, I made it to 30, and now I'm going to go to 60. Oh, I got to my 60 days, and I white knuckled it to 60, and then he would slip. And he'd be like, I am horrible. I've made all these mistakes. I've messed my life up. Instead of, I made a mistake and I'm stepping back into this recovery process and giving up. He didn't do that. He stepped back in, connected with his group, did relapse prevention stuff. He figured his crap out so that he could continue the cycle of recovery. That's what it's about. That's truly what it's about. We are all going to mess up. All of us. We all make mistakes. We all sometimes make big, huge mistakes that have life-altering effects. And we can spend the rest of our lives in shame over it, or we can step out of that shame into, I've made a big mistake and I'm going to make amends and I'm going to heal my own life. And that's just my story. So, thanks.